Ladies and gentlemen, welcome once again to the Duval Dive. Of course, I am Kyle Nash, the student of the game of Fans First Sports Network, bringing you the good times here as listen, we're this close to actual, real, it counts this time. The scores are real football for the Jacksonville Jaguars. And really at this point now, it's time for everybody to prepare for the first game, the season opener for the Jacksonville Jaguars in Miami facing the Dolphins. But before we get into that, listen, we got a whole other week. Next week, starting Wednesdays at 7:30 p.m., you'll see the Duval Dive as we prepare for the upcoming game each week at that time. Wednesday, 7:30 p.m. Eastern, by the way. And then, of course, we'll do the Duval Dive live after every game for the instant reaction. So look out for those things Wednesday and, of course, Sunday. Typically nights, and then, anything that's other than Sunday or a Thursday night game or anything like that, we'll adjust accordingly. So make sure you pay attention for all that. But with all that business out of the way, we still got plenty of roster stuff to go through. And really, we talked about the surprise snubs, perhaps the surprise cuts with Jamal St. Cyr of News4 Jax. That was a fun time all the way around for our 50th episode, our announcement with FFSN, that whole relationship, and just big things coming. But I could not be climbing this mountain without my personal champion, Big Cat Country's own Travis D. Holmes. What's going on, champion?
Man, I'm doing well, bro. We are finally exiting the busiest time of year, and now we can talk about just basic stuff like NFL football. Thank you, Lord. I'm here for it.
Yeah, no, hey, listen, I got to tell you this. The football season starting is a wonderful thing. I have to say, though, pulling the late night I did covering the UCF opener for the Black and Gold Banneret. Listen, I'm finding the energy because I love you, Duval and Devout, out there to make this work. But I am looking forward to when, games are actually, on the weekends again. Looking at you, UCF. Enough of this Thursday opener trash, please. Thank you. Anyway, enough about that. I'm monologuing, but we did talk about biggest snubs from the 53-man roster in our eyes. Another excellent tribute paid in the form of Travis D. Holmes reminding us of yesterday and it being so hard to say goodbye to it. But we wanted to switch it to the positive. What on the roster surprised you that you saw coming out of the cuts that happened this past Tuesday? And I mean, let's just open it up with that as we look through here. Obviously, there's some conversations to be had at the DB spot. If Christian Braswell was snubbed, who took that spot that we weren't sure would? Same thing with Tyler Shatley on the O-line, and some very strange things with the edge rush. Let me start in your house though with the DBs. What was it you see there that you weren't exactly expecting? Good, bad, otherwise, but you were just I didn't think they were going to go that way.
I did not think they were going to go that way, and I wasn't alone. Jamal St. Cyr of News4 Jax kind of said the same thing on Tuesday. Basically, we all kind of thought Christian Braswell spots locked on the roster, and fortunately for the Jaguars, hey, he did not have any other active roster claims, so they were able to get him back on the practice squad. But that was still shocking to me, based on everything we saw in camp, based on all the opportunities that he had, to have man-on-man coverage against the Jaguars, best receiver in my opinion, Christian Kirk, and the way he rose to the occasion. Hey man, I thought that was a done deal. But I also did say on my 53 thoughts on the 53-man roster, BigCatCountry.com, take a look at it, of talking about Montaric Brown, that I said it to a few people in camp. There was a day that he had like 2 dominant press coverage reps against Parker Washington, where he just he hemmed him up. I'm just gonna call it what it is. He hemmed the man up, had the man on the ground, like crawling on the ground, trying to get off the line of scrimmage, basically. And I'm like, dang, if Montaric makes the roster, that's how he does it. And I said it then, and then he had another rep later in practice, like a very similar rep where he just had like a real dominant press coverage rep. And I'm like, them coaches gonna look at that film and start drooling. Like, that is the way he makes the roster. And then he ends up making a roster. And I can't say I'm super surprised, but I am more surprised because of the way they had to limit the number of cornerbacks. And that meant that Christian was off the roster instead of Montaric. That was the part where I kind of just like, dang, that stinks.
Yeah, and I mean, I could see, especially with Dewey, Andrew Wingard, not knowing necessarily his return. He's already on injured reserve. He's out for the first, I think, 4 to 6 weeks, something like that. So I think keeping safety roster spots accounted for, in albeit still a pretty deep safety room, if you ask me. Um, I could see the logic there too. They rolled the dice and won on this one. Like, hey, listen, this has kind of been a theme this offseason. The Jags have rolled the dice in certain places and either won or lost. They rolled the dice on Calvin Ridley and lost that one. But did they really lose considering how much they won?
That's a tie. I don't know. We'll see.
We will see, but early indicators with how PTJ is going, which another die roll, by the way, to see if this rookie can replace a guy with experience. So far, again, doing its job. So maybe the die roll didn't fail. There's a lot of those kind of things. The die roll of Mitch Morris curing everything with the offensive line interior issues. Gabe Davis transitioning from being what the role he had at Buffalo to becoming the air quotes new tall Zay Jones, right? Those are places where they've kind of thrown the dice around too. We have more. There's definitely one other one I want to ask you about, but we'll get to it there. But yeah, I with the DB core, there's a lot of, I'm confident in them. And you informed me of something that's a conversation among the fan base that I didn't want to address because I don't get it. But they apparently, the fan base is all clamoring for more free agency acquisition in the defensive secondary. I don't get that.
Yeah, though. I mean, I understand it. Like,
help me.
Fans will always want more. Fans will always want a known product over a question mark. And I think it's fair to say that the Jaguars secondary is a question mark. I'm not going not the whole secondary, but we have, you have Darnell Savage, who's going to be your safety / big safety, depending on, how you want to look at it in the 4-4-2 versus the 4-2-5 versus the 4-3. And you potentially may be giving significant snaps to Antonio Johnson at the other safety spot. You also have the corner situation with Ronald Darby versus maybe Jerry and Jones. Like, those are legitimately, I won't say, they're kind of question marks. And I think it's fair to say that because if you don't live in Jacksonville, you're probably looking at that like, if there's a weak spot in the secondary, that's probably it. And I think that's a fair assessment because, again, we live very close to this and we kind of hold this sometimes maybe a little bit too tight in how we view it. So Ronald Darby he's played great in his limited snaps elsewhere, but he's also had significant, injury risk as far as that's concerned.
Right.
And for someone who's a fan to say, hey, man, we have all of this cap space. Why aren't we going to get a Xavier Howard? Why aren't we going to get trade for a Lattimore? Why aren't we going to get one of these guys who are more known products? I understand the argument, but I also see this staff is seeming to be fully in on this whole, hey, we're a draft and development team. And you can't really argue with the results that they've shown you at, as far as Tank Bigsby, as far as Parker Washington, as far as Cooper, as far as all these guys, they've shown you the evidence that you probably should trust them. But fans aren't here for that, especially not Jaguar fans. We've been burnt enough.
I mean, fans aren't exactly known for patience in their presence, regardless of college, NFL, top tier, bottom tier teams, whatever. I definitely get that. But I think the part that's the miscalculation, like you mentioned the Jags have all this cap space. But again, Andre Cisco still needs his extension theoretically. There's some other things in the water. I have no idea what. Travis Etienne, of course. If the Jags manage to make Etienne great again, how realistic is season 6? Coming up. In the future for him in Jacksonville, right? So if Trent Baalke and the front office have given us evidence of anything, and they may not be thinking this is me speculating with the tea leaves, that they are trying to make sure they have their foundation in place and paid for before you start to spike in the salary cap, right? Now, granted, as also has been consistent, unless they change this policy, by the way, right? We're not expecting Cisco to do an extension during the season. It tends to be Trent Baalke's policy. We've said it on this show. You specifically, I've said it on the show that that's not a thing he wants and likes to do.
Yep.
And so he's got what? Just over a week to lock something up with Cisco if it's going to happen this offseason. So these are all things I think that need to be considered in the decision as well.
But I don't know that they're ready to do that just yet because it's more of a show me situation, and the fact that the safety market isn't insane, that would then give you the option to even have Cisco under team control another year next year.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not something where it's urgent. It's just like, hey, show me on the field, and if you can show me, I mean, that's my interpretation. That's the vibe that I get from this, is that the Cisco situation seems more like if you can show me on the field with this new defense that you can be that guy, that you can be that Jesse Bates, then maybe we'll pay you like him or something similar to that. So, I mean, they got the $16 million in cap space for this year. They have $25 million as of next year, currently under contract. Like, they have space to do whatever they want to do. It just feels more like it's not a will to do it because they want to be proven right first.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. I mean, I'll say this, though. You mentioned this is the only place I would push back is I'm trying to the only place I'd push back is safety talent isn't what it used to be. It seems to be harder to find. So yeah, and we mentioned this whether we wanted to ourselves extend Campbell or Cisco. I just think the wealth of safety talent of a guy that could do everything is just limited in the NFL nowadays. And maybe I'm wrong with that, but
well, I mean, when you say do everything, you can't really hit these days. I mean, Cisco has been known to have some major hits. Don't get me wrong, but
let me rephrase.
You can't really destroy the middle.
Yeah, by hit, I mean being able to defend both dimensions of an offense, run and pass, right? Yes. So, I mean, like the Derwin Jameses, the Minka Fitzpatricks, those kind of cats. I mean, listen, I don't know that we're going to see a world again where John Lynch, Brian Dawkins, Ed Reed, and Troy Polamalu are all in the NFL at the same time. I don't think we're going to anything like that again. I just don't think that's going to happen like that. You know, we were graced to have Ronnie Lott and Leroy Butler adjacent to each other, you know, as an example there. But yeah. Anyways, that's where I'm at. It's almost tantamount to, you know, like the NBA where you have Jordan, Kobe, and LeBron all in the same time at one point happening. For the safeties, like that was that era then. Back then, like with the names I mentioned, you have those four guys, four Hall of Fame caliber guys, all existing at the same time. And the other safeties around them, you know, I still remember some names. You know, Kennedy was one that was really good. I forget.
But do you believe that Cisco is going to be one of those guys when we look back?
I don't think he's going to be a Hall of Famer. No, what I'm telling you is the tide has the tide is sinking at the safety position in terms of talent and has raised the value of the good ones that you have. Do I think there is a Hall of Fame safety in the NFL right now? The answer might be no. You know, so that's why Cisco's value to me is higher than it would be in other eras, I suppose.
And I would argue because that tide is going down, it probably means that person may be more replaceable.
Well, no, that's
because the difference. If you hear me out, like if the overall quality of play in the NFL is just a little bit lower, and you have a guy who's playing, you know, up here, but we don't know if he's going to be at that next level. We don't know if he's going to take it to a whole level. Like we don't know if we're going to get there, but you could probably get a rookie that may be able to give you 80% of that, 90% of that for, I don't know, what, a fourth of the cost. That's a conversation we're having, and I'm a pro Cisco guy. I'm just being honest with you.
Yes. No, I think this is definitely a pro Cisco podcast at this point in time. But I think also with the safety and the reason why, like you did very good to make it a measurable. I did not think I would be talking this deep about defensive backs on the show, by the way. But here the hell we are. I don't know. Shouts to the Duval Devout. When you listen to this episode, I want you to decide what you like more. Me breaking down DBs or Travis talking O-line. Because I'll tell you what, both of the Twilight Zone, and it's a fantastic time. But, I hear where you're going. I think in the case of a Cisco or somebody else like that, you have too many intangibles for that to just be a simple answer of, hey, this guy makes a fraction of what he does. But Cisco, I think, is a leader on the team. I mean, that was the toughest thing about, let's just say, for example, to make the point, Arden Key was not going to be one of your top 3 pass rushers on the Jacksonville Jaguars squad. But darn it, he had some intangibles to where he was a guy that was good in the locker room and the dudes liked him. And when you called on him, he might make a contribution in a big moment, but he wasn't going to be a major puller of the wagon, right? I think the big reason why he's also not in Jacksonville as of 2 years ago, right? So I think
the reason he's not in Jacksonville is because he didn't want to be in Jacksonville. Let me be clear on that one. Arden wanted to be where he's at right now for whatever reason.
I mean, okay, but let's pretend that wasn't the case, and I appreciate you being accurate in such a fashion that it ruins my narrative. That doesn't offend me like it does some people on Twitter. But with all that being said, yeah, I'll put it this way. I think you mentioned the point. Does the lack of talent in the NFL maybe reduce the safety market, i.e. the running backs? That's possible. But if you have a unicorn for the era in Andre Cisco, you either have to pay him or you need to be smart and utilize him as a piece to get some more, right?
And this is the year for him to prove that he would have. That's why I say Jesse Bates, because Bates had already shown that he was a great safety, and then had a few down years, and then had the great safety year under Ryan Nielsen. So it would be the same thing, in my opinion, for Cisco. He didn't have this year to prove it. If he proves it, he gets paid. If he doesn't, he maybe gets extended for a small deal, and maybe he's okay with that. Like that's a interesting conversation.
Yeah, we can save that one for 2025. Robert's in the comments, as he tends to do. Thank you once again. He steps in here. Jones was playing outside linebacker at times, he says. His defense is going to be a nightmare matchup for teams. I think there are some teams that will just match up poorly. And just it's funny. Everybody has, when they say they match up poorly, I mean their strengths are with the weaknesses of the other team. I can make that argument for the Dolphins, for example, in the trenches. The Jags are strong where they aren't. Jags defense versus the Miami offense. But then again, what's behind them is what's going to make or break both sides. I
mean, and Jones playing outside linebacker is not a weird thing because they played a lot of nickel and dime throughout the preseason. We know Ryan Nielsen, like Dennis Allen, plays. They're very similar. They come from the same scheme. Like that's what they do. 25% dime, 25%, we'll say nickel or big nickel, whatever you want to call it, like 4-2-5 may end up being their base defense. That includes either Jarian Jones or Darnell Savage playing essentially that outside linebacker role, that slot corner role, big nickel corner role, whatever you want to call it. So having them play that makes total sense because of who they are and kind of how they run their defense. But you're going to see a lot of rotation of the defensive line. You're going to see a lot of rotation even within some parts of the secondary, whether that's the safety and the slot nickel role. I just question: are you going to be seeing a lot of the rotations with the linebackers? That's the whole Devin Lloyd conversation between Lloyd and Muma. I'm curious of what that's going to really look like. They seem to like Muma, and we know they liked Lloyd in the past. I just don't know. I don't know where that lands because I'm tired of trying to guess what Ryan Nielsen's going to do and what his philosophy truly is before we have a chance to see it.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Robert also comes in with this in this man Ryan Nielsen system. Playing one high, Cisco will be the only one with the eyes deep. This is Cisco's record INT year. I'll tell you, if he earns the extension as you talk about, that would certainly be a big factor.
Right, he's correct. That's Jesse Bates. That's it. Yeah.
So, anyways, let's go ahead and head over the edge. You mentioned Chad Muma and a lot of stuff, but I'm going to go. Muma will come up naturally. I'm trying to avoid that topic just because trying to give Muma praise for some reason is difficult for me. I'll have to find a way to cope with that.
That is fine. Locked On Jaguars, T-Wig, and they just covered it yesterday. Yeah, he has a whole 30 minutes talking about this whole Muma versus Lloyd conversation. That is fine. We don't have to cover it.
Oh yeah, I'm not looking to, but where I am curious is listen. I remember sitting down. It was before the Bucks joint practice.
Yeah.
And I was trying to, whenever I write a guy's name for the first time, like I know how to spell Eric Armstead, but I want to double check. It is with an A and a K, right? Yes. But then I see on the sheet, DE.
Mhm.
Like, wait. So I look over to my friend John Shipley of Jaguars on SI. Hey, I thought he was a tackle. Yeah, I don't know. He can play defensive end, but just put tackle for now. It's where it's okay, cool.
He's a big end. Yeah.
Well, I assumed he would be doing most of his work inside in the Jag scheme. But now that we've seen what we've seen in the 53-man cuts, there's evidence by the lack of defensive pass rushers on the roster that they're going to kick Eric Armstead out, which, by the way, if true, completely wrecks our load management theory, right? So, and that has me a little concerned, Travis, I'll be honest.
Well, I don't know that it wrecks our load management theory. I still feel like that's going to be in effect because you still have three. That's your rotational edge. Whether like between the three of them, someone's obviously not going to be at edge, and more likely than not, that's going to be when you move Eric Armstead in the inside. So he may still get all the work. He just may get it all over the place, and that's fine also because you have Josh Allen, you have Trevon Walker, and you have Eric Armstead. And you can just figure out where you want them based on what the situation calls for. Like if it's a run down versus a pass down, is there a weak guard on this team versus a weak tackle? You have options. You have a blank chessboard. The world is your oyster. Just figure it out. Like for Ryan Nielsen purposes, that's great because he did the same thing in Atlanta. He was just always moving guys around, again, rotating them in.
Right.
Now he has options with the guy who, you may want to have a little bit of load management. Well, you don't have to give him, 99% of the snaps.
Okay. And listen, maybe I'm panicking a little bit. I know that they have other bodies, Devon Hamilton in the middle there doing things. Of course, we mentioned Mason Smith, Jordan Jefferson, all these guys coming in.
Wait, speaking of, those are some of my surprises. They kept 8 interior defensive linemen, which resulted in you also keeping, someone like a Roy Robertson Harris on the roster, who I think everyone in Duval thought was out of the paint, just to be honest about this.
Right.
Like most people I spoke to, if you're predicting the 53-man roster, you're saying, okay, no, Roy Robertson's probably gone. You're saying, maybe Jeremiah Ledbetter may be gone. You're saying, SSA Ultimate.
It's hard to believe Ledbetter would be gone. I'm going to say that real quick. If we're going to give flowers.
I'm just saying there were multiple guys on that list. Like again, and a lot of them were those interior guys where you're just like, I think they may keep 5, they may keep 6. No one thought they were keeping 8. Like that's a big difference. But again, the Jaguars struggled at stopping the run last year. So if you want to keep rotating these guys in and making sure your weakness from last season becomes a strength, maybe Ryan Nielsen, maybe you feel like I need to keep extra guys just to make sure we're good later in the year. I can understand that.
And injuries have come up. He knows he has guys on there in Devon Hamilton, in Eric Armstead that I don't want to say have chronic injury problems, but I think that's fair actually at this point. They both have chronic injury issues. Armstead more because he's played so much football, obviously, and then Hamilton with the back. Like you never know how about back injuries are tricky, man. Back and neck. Yes. This is what made Peyton Manning bouncing back in Denver so amazing, for example. Like cervical spine injury into breaking Tom Brady's record in touchdowns was crazy. Like, so
it's not the norm. For sure.
Yeah, I mentioned all that to say, I get it if that's the motivation. I'm obviously speculating.
You want to make sure you cure every potential issue and that you can't blame it on one person being missing, one person getting injured, one person being out, because you gave yourself extra depth an O-line. You gave yourself extra depth an interior D-line so that you have no excuses. And I understand it. Hey, the excuses are done. We were heavy in wide receiver last year because we thought we were super deep in that area. We're heavy at D-line this year because we need to be super deep in this area to make sure the issues from last year don't creep over into 2024. If that's your route, if that's your philosophy, I fully understand it. I'm even somewhat behind it.
Yeah.
Also, shout out to Caleb Johnson, man.
Yeah.
My boy made the roster.
We were both high on him from literally day one at camp in red zone drills there.
Mm-hmm.
A quick thing in the comments. The reminder is that there was a cyst in Devon Hamilton's back. Yeah, I know it wasn't like a chronic back problem.
Spinal abscess.
But again, anything with the back, and granted, my bias here is coming from my time working in healthcare data and in medical implants and all that sort of stuff. The one element of surgery that still exists on the human body that's purely, for lack of a better word, barbaric, is back surgery, just because it's so difficult to get to where you are inevitably cutting into something you probably don't want to, in some small fashion at least. And so that's very chaotic, right? It's not like knees used to be, before Adrian Peterson came back and, broke records and all that ish. And like now, comparatively, ACL tears are like a few weeks, when that could be potentially, if you're late in your career ending, right? So that's and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the fact that it was just that mass that we were talking, like you were talking about, is enough to make it to where he'll be relatively safe. I will see it first. I've seen too many careers go awry with back and neck stuff. So
yeah, I fully understand. Anything involving the spine, because the spine can impact so many other parts of the body, you're going to be a little bit leery about. You're going to be a little bit cautious. You're going to be a little bit worried. Yeah. I would blame you if you weren't. If you weren't worried, I would call you a homer right now. Like I think that is a fair way to approach that issue. I want to see Devon show me, and he has shown me so far this preseason.
Right.
But it is preseason. Now show me in the season. In
a world where literally every down is a car accident.
Right. This ain't just bingo. You're not just, you played O-line, like this is not a normal job where I'm able to get old gracefully. This is a job where my old ankle injury is now become a serious ankle injury 2 weeks later because this weird looking hit, this 350-pound offensive lineman stepped on it or fell on it awkwardly. Like, this is a real game for real men, and some of these things will happen. So I fully understand the apprehension to say he's good, we're good, Super Bowl. Like, come on, let's have a real conversation like adults.
Hey, man, being adults and having a real conversation is what we do on this show. But unfortunately, our real conversation is going to have to come to an end here. Travis, we got to extend this damn show. We need to talk about this off air. I mean, hey, listen, if you guys want it out there among the Duval devout, let us know. I mean, hey, we take requests. I'm just saying. But Travis Holmes, tell the world where you can be found.
I will let them know where to find me as soon as I say, hey, man, shout out to Yasir Abdullah. Shout out to Tim Jones. Everybody wrote you guys off. Congratulations on making the roster. Keep all out of control, especially on those special teams. I can be found on all the socials, Travis D. Holmes. You can find my writings covering the Jacksonville Jaguars, bigcatcountry.com. Again, we cover everything, press conferences, practice, rap write-ups all throughout the offseason. Also game reviews. Check out the 53 thoughts on the 53-man roster. We talk about literally every single person on the active roster. Take a look at that, bigcatcountry.com. Also, sir, where can you be found?
Hey, listen, first of all, make sure you get that man's musings on the 53. That's a lot of work and a lot of quality intelligence from Travis D. Holmes on bigcatcountry.com, please. Thank you. Anyways, of course, I am Kyle Nash, the student of the game. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Threads at the SOTG. Find me on Facebook as a student of the game. Check out my writings with the Fans First Sports Network, the Black and Gold Banneret, specifically covering the UCF season opener last night. My night class session, I'll tell you how the Knights make the grade and what my thesis is on what's going to happen moving forward. Check that out, blackandgoldbanneret.com. As well as the post-game podcast that we did on the Black and Gold Banneret YouTube channel, Night Shift Live, where I bring in my thoughts while Eric Lopez and Jake Ferraro, as well as Bryson Turner, all talking about what's to come for the Knights after that opener. I mean, hey, 57-3, but yet there's still concerns. I'm just saying. Anyways, and of course, don't forget the Student of the Game podcast, Wednesday nights, 9 p.m. Eastern. Check that out. Next week is the simulcast with the Huddle Up crew as we do final predictions for the NFL. And don't forget, new time for the Duval Dive, 7:30 p.m. Wednesday night Eastern. And then the Duval Dive live, the post-game instant reaction after the game. So for Travis D. Holmes of Big Cat Country, I'm Kyle Nash, the student of the game. Until next time, everyone, class dismissed. Come on.